Hey everyone, my name is Neil Karski, and I'm the CEO of Patient Engine, a seven-figure digital marketing, lead conversion, and coaching agency for high-ticket aesthetics providers. And I would like to personally welcome you to the Aesthetics Millionaires Show, where we sit down with industry entrepreneurs to talk about their personal journeys and discuss proven growth strategies. My genuine hope is that through this podcast, we can create more success stories in this industry and help more business owners scale past their competition. Enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of Aesthetics Millionaires Show. This one I'm actually doing from Mexico, so we're not in a studio today, but we got a very, very special guest today, Dr. George Gavrila. He's the owner, founder, and president of ProMD Health. It's an amazing franchise. He's going to tell you guys a little bit more about that today. I'm so excited to have this stud here with us today. He's got a very iconic mustache as well, as you guys can see. And welcome to the show, Dr. George.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Dr. George, let's just dive into it. So tell us a little bit more about your career in med and how you got into the med aesthetics wellness world. Tell us a little bit more about your history, some of the early days.
Sure. Early days consisted of trying to figure out a way to I was really focused on getting into orthopedic surgery. Um, that was sort of like medical school. Um, and then I ran into a plastic surgeon by the name of George Grace, um, who was like, "You've got to be out of your mind. Like, you're going to be dealing with overweight, diabetic people with injuries that they can't fix, with joints that won't heal. Um, you should really consider this route called aesthetic dermatology, or I think it was cosmetic dermatology that he recommended. He was a plastic surgeon, so I got to spend some time in his office. He was a plastic surgeon, split his time uh, at his med spa, and I was like, this is a ton of fun. This seems pretty easygoing. A lot of fun interaction. Um, and so he sat me down after our clerkship and asked me if there was anything he could do to help. And I was like, yeah, if you could just help me understand what it means to to get into this space, um, really dig it. And he said it's pretty simple. Find a good residency that's going to get you trained in many of the things that you're going to need in this industry moving forward, and that's a combination of dermatology, plastic surgery, general surgery, internal medicine, family medicine, OBGYN. And so his recommendation was to take family medicine. And I remember the evening very clearly. Sat down with my mother and father and told them that I wouldn't be pursuing orthopedic surgery, that I'd be pursuing cosmetic dermatology. And being that my father is from communist Romania, he heard orthopedic surgeon to cosmetologist, and essentially disowned me, kicked me out of the house, and was like, "That's it. Um, you make your own decisions from here." So it was pretty rough, to be frank, but was fully committed once I did make the decision. Went to the University of Maryland for my residency. Was lucky enough to have the capability of custom tailoring my residency. All the electives were at Hopkins, plastic surgery. Were at University of Maryland dermatology, their joint program between Hopkins and in Maryland. And then I spent a bunch of time with a bunch of surgeons and then a bunch of OBGYNs. And so I really believe that it formed a very solid foundation for where I am today. I then applied and got the inaugural Integrative Medicine Fellowship at the University of Maryland, um, and was there for about 9 months. Due to some, what's called political reasons, I never ended up finishing that fellowship. Um, and started ProMD Health concurrently, sort of in parallel, and found that ProMD Health was taking off. This fellowship wasn't giving me what I needed. In fact, it was beginning to slow me down, and so I forfeited it and started the practice, and here we are 15 years later.
What sparked it within you to want to become an entrepreneur, to have your own practice and get away from, potentially working at a hospital or at somebody else's practice?
Just in general, I'm a pretty independent person. I think that I do better um, leading a team. So I was, chief resident uh, of my residency, um, and so just the idea of being in control of something was a little bit more palatable to me. I kind of grew up with it as well. My mother was a bit of an entrepreneur herself. She started uh, a skincare salon, I guess. Ever since I was a little kid, I remember her running it from our basement to several shops. She was over in Baltimore, Slade Avenue for a while, and then she ended up moving up to Timonium. So I guess in a way, the entrepreneurial spirit was something that I grew up with. Is just a part of my being. I feel like um, if I'm not creating something or in charge of it, I just, the thought of even moving this practice to a place where I'm not calling the shots or am just an employee is really not tenable to me.
When when you were first starting your practice, did you have like a lot of resources? Did you have a lot of capital? Like, how did you fund everything? And then initially, what was your strategy, like your go-to-market strategy, as far as like what you were going to provide? Because I would say, we know that the industry has more than doubled in the last 5 years, but back then, it was obviously less competitive, but it was more so the market was still not educated on a lot of these things. So, what was your go-to-market strategy at that time? How did you fund it as well?
It's a funny story. So at the time, there was really no good solution other than a particular laser for onychomycosis or toenail fungus. And so this was at the same time that Groupon was becoming to become a thing. And I realized that I could quickly find a way to treating patients to something that I was pretty thoroughly, like I understood onychomycosis pretty readily. I understood how these lasers worked. I understood how to properly treat it, but I didn't have a laser. So I had this plan set in place, and I found a buddy of mine that I would mountain bike with. His father-in-law, or soon-to-be father-in-law, was a pretty wealthy guy. Spent a little bit of time with him, and he was willing to give me I think the laser cost me 25 grand, a $25,000 note, and I'd pay it down every month. Most months I would just earn enough to pay down the note. I think I was able to get it paid in a year. Um, but yeah, what I would do is I was in fellowship, and then I would sublet space from various people, and it was pretty challenging to get people scheduled to come in that purchased these Groupons, and then I would treat their onychomycosis, and they saw a huge difference after the first treatment, and it was pretty clear that if they wanted to see the outcome of a proper treatment, that they would have to get more of these treatments. And so I had a package for them, and it was pretty straightforward. The Groupon brought them in, did a nice job, offered them the package, and 50% of them said yes, 50% of them said no, and slowly paid off this laser, built a bit of a war chest, was able to have a small enough fund where I could, after incorporating, go ahead and go to a landlord and strike a genuine offer on a lease. Started off with like a 1,500 square foot lease. Um, and then I remember it was time to buy my first vial of Botox. So I like looked up the rep on the on the Google, and his name was Michael Liberto. I'm still friends with him today. We joke about it because I didn't have that much money at the time, and I was like, listen, I think I'm ready to take on some Botox. But my big question for you, Mike, is, do I purchase two 100 unit vials or four 50 unit vials? And to this day, it's it's more of I suppose, an inside joke because today we go through like, I don't know, something like 4,000 units a day or something like that. So it's comical how it went from just this simple idea of treating something that was within the cosmetic derm world, doing a good job with it, and leading with that into basically a package, and then offering Botox. And in short, that's kind of the direction we took. I had no capital. I had over $250,000, $300,000 worth of med school debt I was trying to pay off. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, I was kicked out of my parents' house, which I was living in rent free at the time. So I was trying to carry a rent. Looking back on it, the God had my back for sure. It was sort of like a calling that I kind of came to answer. It was a tough time, but it was a fun time. I was young and didn't have much to lose, so it was a good time.
That's usually when you have the most to gain as well. So you got a
It's true.
laser on a loan, and then you got in Groupon, and at that point, Groupon was totally different than it is now, obviously.
Yeah,
And I assume that was what, early 2000s? Was that early 2000s?
yeah, it's 15 years ago. So what is that? 2010?
2010.
Yeah, 2010.
But that was like basically in a recession, during the recession almost, or the tail end of the recession, which is when Groupon made most of its money,
Mhm.
because people were looking for deals and they were looking to, yeah, they were looking to, they had tighter budgets, right? So, but you learn how to sell. I think that's a big lesson there too, right? Because that's why I always tell people and my clients as well, like, you have to have an offer, and the offer is the tip of the iceberg to get somebody interested. But there's so much more than the offer, and people don't buy treatment plans from the offer. People buy treatment plans from human beings like yourself. And I think the lesson learned, where you learn probably how to do effective consults, you got them in on the offer, so you learn some marketing, and then you learn how to sell, because obviously, like you said, 50% of these people bought treatment plans, and it started stacking up. Things got paid off, and then you entered your next chapter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think selling is part of it, but I think honestly, it's just the genuine ability to connect and communicate, right? I think the selling is a byproduct of it, but if you can find a way to genuinely connect with people, it opens up the gates to the temple, right? So to get into an opportunity where they can genuinely understand that you've got their best intentions. And yeah, I mean, it's really not selling if you're recommending a procedure that's going to better their outcome and what they came to you in the first place, right? It's really just being a good doctor.
Yeah, or a good provider, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about sales a little bit more. I talk about sales probably more than I talk about anything else. Um, and a lot of people in the medical space, a lot of doctors don't like that word a lot, but I do think it's a critical It's a critical term that you need to accept because, like you said, like no one per se likes to be sold. I actually like to be sold. I love good salespeople, but
Me too.
I do think that, like you said, I it's if you are genuine, if you are authentic, if you have somebody's best interest at the heart, and you genuinely just care about another human being, you're gonna do that much better in getting them to say yes.
Yeah.
And I think you found that on pretty early, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of, I think, what we blanket as sales is really like framing, positioning, uh, guidance, um, encouragement. It's it's providing different perceptions or perspectives to the same thing. Um, I think it's pretty clear. I've seen it plenty in our industry. Those that just hustle and sell, right? They blindly sell because they know that that's the service or the device that they're going to get the most return on, or they're being incentivized by something else. And it's more of like a bad faith influence. Whereas I think if it's led by good intention, right? Like my big thing is, I really offer four things to every patient. The first is I'm going to keep you safe. If we're hedging on safety, we're having reasons and conversations as to why we're hedging on safety. The second is to keep them psychologically sound. Body dysmorphia is real. And whether that's like a little body dysmorphic thinking on a nasolabial fold, or the fact that they're 100 pounds and think they're 300 pounds, it's still there. The third is to keep them financially sound. If there's financial tension in the relationship, I don't get to build the relationship. Whether it's between me and the patient or her and her significant other, the tension exists. And the fourth is I'm always conservative. And so if I frame and position myself in these four vows that I found to be completely honest and true, the recommendations that I have often don't come or don't fall up on my patients in a light where it's ill-willed, or patients think that I'm making recommendations for my personal gain or the gain of the practice. It's really for their own personal gain. And I think that's really the difference that I learned early on. Um, and it's difficult to do because you have to communicate all these things to a patient. Um, and oftentimes you don't have the time, but I think the art is doing that in a really tight window of time and being able to connect with somebody genuinely, um, and understand what their, be it aesthetic or wellness goals are, have them articulate it back, and then formulate a plan for them. And then within those purviews, be able to deliver.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think the way I teach and coach people is getting away from doing tiered stuff like X amount of sessions or like prefix packages, because I do think that a lot of time, for a long time, people were like, "Hey, here's my menu," you know.
Right.
And as the industry grew and became more saturated, and more providers entered the space, and I think it caused also some confusion to the consumer. People, obviously, the trust barrier went up. So what I started teaching people is like, hey, you should be selling a customized treatment plan that but maybe not tie into like X amount of sessions that you have on this menu. Maybe this client doesn't need it, or this patient has goals that aren't aligning with a 3-pack or a 5, whatever it is, right? You got to give them the best thing, the best treatment plan that's going to get them the best outcomes and results. And if they don't want that, if they're not going to buy it, then you need to make them aware of that, right? So I think that's a shift I'm also seeing from inauthentic to personalized selling.
Yeah, I think oftentimes just because it's in a menu or um, marketing so decided this was the sweet spot for, or even a vendor decided what the sweet spot for a particular treatment solution would be. It's not necessary, and I think taking the more stepwise, conservative, sequential approach, uh, increasing touch points with your patients, whether it's uh, in person or virtual, helps us understand their trajectory on most of this stuff, whether it's um, you know facial balancing or something a little less chic, like I don't know, hair removal or pigment changes, right? And so I think we have found that taking a more conservative route, increasing touch points, transparency, really leads to the relationship, and the relationship itself then leads to loyalty, and patients begin to trust you, and they not only trust you for the work that you're successfully executing, but then they talk to their friends about it, they talk to their family about it, and it grows organically. So ultimately, it's just doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing. That's good. That's a good message. Um, Walk us through like the growth of that first practice, from the laser to talks. Like, what services did you have, and did you add anything else? Like, how did your staff look like? What else did you do for marketing? How did you grow your first practice? And then we can segue into opening more locations, because a lot of people, I think, have this glamorous dream of owning multiple locations, but they haven't figured out their first one, right? So um, let's walk through your first location, growing and scaling that to a point where you felt like you were ready to venture out and open more locations or franchise. Um, Walk us through that period of your life.
The original scaling of ProMD was really walking a tightrope. Um, Staff was minimal. Uh, the hours that I was putting in were bountiful, and the the gentleman that I had kind of running operations was not only running operations, was also running like my front desk. It was kind of a comedic sort of circumstance. He would be the guy behind the front desk, taking the chart, greeting the individual, and then he'd be the guy who came around the door like, "Hey, welcome, come on in, see Dr. Gavrila." Um, and but I believe because of the genuine nature behind it, people were into it. And then we subsequently hired, and it was Jessica, um, a front desk, a receptionist who was wonderful. She was at that time a little virtual, but then in office. And Rob, that was running my operations at the time, was sort of splitting the time between helping me figure out a way to grow this business as an operational guy and covering the front. And then so when we weren't seeing patients, uh, Rob and I would strategize. We would take a look at our finances. We would discern what was the right next step, and it was pretty clear that the right next step would be to bring on another provider. At that point in time, I started getting pretty busy. My time to revenue was pretty linear, but we needed to find someone else that was sort of split the demographic a little bit. So we were looking for a female um, PA injector, and lo and behold, I found her at a training one evening. It was like a Galderma training or an Allergan training I had gone to, and she had gotten my phone number, called me a couple days later, and was saying that she was really echoing the sentiments that I was putting forth at the training. Was wondering if I had any opportunities, and So I turned to Rob and I was like, do we have the opportunities? And, with the little money that we did manage to squirrel away, we were able to put together a contract for her in the same stroke, meet with the landlord, pick up some more space. And it kind of happened within almost like a month. We contracted a PA, Amy, and then we expanded from what was like, I think the original space was like 900 square feet to 1,500 square feet. We got two extra rooms, a proper receptionist, a reception area. And then we kind of cranked. We ran there for a while. Um, Rob ended up finding the love of his life in Colorado and had to make a decision. It was clear that he wasn't going to stay with me for a while, so he ended up moving to Colorado, and we still keep in touch to this day. Um, I'm actually going to go see him here in a couple weeks. Um, and at that point in time, Amy had a recommendation on Amy, my PA, had a recommendation on an office manager. And so met with her and was like, well, what could she do? And she came in for a working interview, and she was really into sales, still is really into sales. And I think she sold at the time we were I'm sort of not not proud to say this, but we were kind of launching Bellafill or Artifil when it was first coming out, and she sold like, I don't know, sold me 10 kits and sold Amy another 10 kits, and we made 20 grand in a day. And I was like, holy moly, do you would you like to come work for me? And so that was a yes. Um, and so we kind of ran that type of operation. It was again a pretty tight rope, a narrow path for a while. Um, and then all of us decided to go to, I forget what show it was, but it was in Las Vegas. Um, it was like the Vegas Cosmetics Show, I believe. I think it was a VCS. And we had a great night, first night. Went to the morning conferences, and then our hangovers kicked in, and we decided to go check out the vendor space. The vendor space had like an IV massage chair sort of tucked away in the back. And I was like, this sounds perfect. So got into one of those massage chairs and was just trying to rest up for the afternoon. And I look over, and there's a bunch of guys in suits, running around, hustling, selling this thing called Y-Lift. I'm like, hey buddy, what's this Y-Lift thing? And he's like, don't worry about it, it's not for you. And I was like, what the F? Not, how do I turn this thing off, And like, turn this thing off, but climb down on my chair. I'm like, what do you mean not for me? He's like, it's not for you. And I'm like, okay, let me talk to somebody else. Like, what is this Y-Lift thing? I'm very curious. And ended up meeting my now CEO, Scott. And at the time, he was launching Y-Lift with Dr. Shokel, and we became a Y-Lift provider. Um, After that, Scott decided to leave Y-Lift, and uh, after a couple conversations, we came up with a really palatable vision on what we believe the industry needed. And the industry needed a solution that um, it wasn't private equity backed. That was a solution for providers that wanted to get into the space that didn't have the capital. And so the independent owner concept or the franchise concept became very appealing. And we figured if we could prove it by opening up a second location, then a third, and eventually a fourth, um, that would give us the proof of concept that we could indeed take the independent ownership route and begin a franchise. And so, long story, a little longer, is that's exactly what we did. And so we opened up the Annapolis location, subsequently opened up the DC, then became the Arlington location, and then opened up Florida. Florida's intention was, well, if we could run and manage an office that was out of our geography, then this concept could really be proven. And once we successfully did that, we got together our FDD, and ProMD Franchise Development Group became a thing. Signed on our first franchise, which was our Columbia location, and then the rest is kind of history, kind of rolled from there.
What is your advice to entrepreneurs in this space who are kind of somewhat impatient or that are sometimes looking for those quick gains, maybe pulling out money out of the bank account while the practice hasn't, stabilized? Because you were kind of saying, hey, like for a while, for quite some time, we're operating pretty lean. We're trying to figure it out. We're really trying to build that traction because we didn't have a lot of capital. We're kind of bootstrapping and we're just, building piece by piece to really understand what was working for us and to trying to get that stability. And you're probably not going out and having a fancy steak dinner at that point every night. So, or maybe you were.
It was always on the vendors.
But what is your advice for people who are at that stage, who are maybe thinking, because I believe like aesthetics ownership kind of became somewhat of a trend in some ways, and it was like it's a cool thing to own a med spa, right? But most people don't realize. Just I would say in any entrepreneurial venture, like it's not easy, right? It's really not easy, and there's different things that there's a difference between revenue and profit also, right? So, what is your advice for people who are kind of in that stage, who are maybe blindsiding themselves a little bit?
There's a lot in there. Yeah, there's definitely a big difference between revenue and profit, that's for sure. I'd say a couple things. I think it's important to lead with the market, or the space today is very different than what it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Um, with private equity getting involved, it really changed the two and really three major elements of the business. The first of which being human capital. The cost of human capital has changed dramatically, and I say that in the way of the expectations of mid levels, of physicians, of providers in general, has completely changed, by a magnitude of at least 30%. I think by most accounts, at 50%, um, if not more. Uh, and then the environment by which they wish to work in, I think that's also notable. Secondly, I think what private equity has done to the relationship with vendors has certainly changed. I think that um, what was once a tiering system, or a world where volume, independent volume with vendors led to a better outcome. Now it's more of like a buy down for many of these med spas, where they really can't get the class A products, the class A devices, the class A drugs, and so they go to class B um, vendors. And so the the buy down, if you will, of the service offering has become another inherent part of what I'm seeing. And the third bit is the market saturation. I think like you said, it's become a trend. There's a med spa on every corner, and whether people are pushing Xeomin as their best product, or um, Latibo, or um, what I consider B-tiered products, uh, they create B-tiered outcomes. But that's not to say that there's anything wrong with it. I think what they often find themselves doing is wanting to grow and expand too quickly. I think patience, um, financial discipline, fiscal responsibility, and uncoupling from the online social media hype is really paramount in the success of anybody, whether you're starting off with an A tier product service offering or a B tier product service offering, and you're hoping to improve upon it. Um, I think all too often we turn on TikTok or um, Instagram and see the perceived success of some other folks, and it's really just perceived success. If you take a look at what happened recently with Ideal Image, folding. There's a couple other practices that are folding. Um, and if you were to watch them on social media, there was no indicator that they were doing anything but crushing. And so, um, my advice to those just getting started, or in that season of looking to expand or scale, my advice is stay the course. Make sure that you've got at least 6 to 9 months, maybe more, of working capital saved up. You're using that to build a line of credit, a relationship with the bank, and then formulating strong relationship with patients. And once your schedule is, let's call it 120% full, then you can start making those moves. But again, times are different these days. 10 years ago, that worked. That worked really well. And so I'm not sure that that advice is as sound today as it was 10 years ago, but I do believe that that general direction makes plenty of sense.
How did you, what strategies and mechanisms did you use um, to grow your first practice? Because I still want to I want to cover that in a little bit more detail. And at what point in uh, in that journey, like maybe financially, maybe you could talk about that, where you were like, all right, we're in a really good spot, like financially, we're in a really good spot with like our SOPs and how we operate, and and then you also had the time, because I think that's really important to know. You also had the time to say, all right, I'm willing to get a little creative and start adding locations. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I do think that's something that's worth covering, and then we can get into the expansion.
Yeah, so mechanisms that we used in the beginning were sort of the aforementioned relationship building. We use the simple concept of Botox banking, and so patients weren't paying for memberships or anything like that at the time, but they were committing to us with Botox banks, Dysport banks. Um, we still harnessed the Groupon concept. And there was also another one back then called like Living Social or something. Um, but back then it was pretty straightforward, because in those times the demographic was really divided into three. It was the person looking for the deal. It was the individual that had experienced the space but was looking for a low risk experience at a new space that had good reviews, or somebody that was completely naive to the space. And so we really capitalized on the latter, 2/3 of the patients. Now it's very different. So that was sort of the mechanism originally. Capturing the patient, making certain that they had a good experience, that the outcome was there, and should they go somewhere else, the experience wasn't really as enamoring as it was with us. And to me, it's really the net sum of marginal gains, which means it's the feel that they get, the vibe that they get when they walk into the office. It's an emotional connection or a connection with the receptionist at the front. It's knowing that they've arrived. It's the sense that they're in the right hands when they get into the treatment room. So again, the experience. Um, and then as we expanded, we realized that this experience concept needed to be outlined and drafted and put into really an SOP. But at the time, we called it our recipe. Um, and we kind of kept our recipe kind of tight to the vest at first. And it really consisted of welcoming a patient, bringing the patient back, doing a pre-consult, communicating the pre-consult with the MA to the provider so that the provider was loaded with the understanding of what was going on in the room. The provider going into the room, doing a true consult, then huddling back up with their MA and leaving the sales or the negotiations to the MA or the sales support there.
Can I stop
Um,
right there for a second?
yeah,
Because I think that's an
yeah.
important point. So were the sales done? Because I do think this is something I see. I think that my general school of thought is that the close, using business lingo here, should be done in the intimacy of a room. And I see that a lot of times that people just, make a recommendation and kind of send the person out into the front desk. Um, and in my opinion, uh, that that creates a gap. Um, and I think that if somebody's had a relationship, at least even a short relationship with a provider, and they've had conversations with that provider in the room, that provider should be taking them all the way through. Um, so I think you make a really important point there. Did you guys keep that model all throughout?
Yeah, we run it that way today. We insist on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think you lose the effort of building a relationship, uh, or to use your terminology, intimacy, right? Or like a little bit more of an intimate relationship with your patient, because talking about spending, frankly, a lot of money on some outcomes is not one that should be, well, first of all, done openly. And I think discretion here is tremendous. Um, and I think what it does is it exposes a lot of characteristics of the relationship. Um, and it can be emotional. It can have a whole different. You can think that a consult is going in one direction, and then when we start talking about executing it, it very quickly takes a very different direction. And so, protecting your patient from embarrassment or judgment, and having them feel comfortable to have that conversation in the confines of a room, in the privacy of a room, I think is, if you're not doing that, then you're missing the bus.
At what point financially, or for whatever to whatever extent you're willing to share, where you're like, this location is healthy, I'm ready for my next location, because I do think that's a critical um, inflection point where you can make that decision.
Yeah, I go back to, times have changed quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 years. And so, what was healthy in 2022 post COVID, uh, and the perception of healthy is very different than what it seems today. Um, but I go back to the basics of are you making a profit? Are your books by and large full? Uh, are you scheduling people out? Like, what is your return, your patient loyalty like? And do you have the bandwidth, both financially and time-wise, to take this on? Because if someone thinks that they can open another office and it's just additive, they're fooling themselves. There is a reductionist component to adding a third party to any relationship, and so you've got to generate the ability to supplant yourself into the other location or find someone that you trust that you can transplant into that location. But with that comes an inevitable loss on both ends. So the startup of the new location, you need to be able to withstand. You're not going to go from zero to 50% revenue in 2 weeks. Like, it's just not going to work. You have to have the patience and the ability to get out into the immediate market, uh, create brand awareness, and get things loaded. All the while, on the other hand, if you've transplanted or if you've supplanted, losing business on the other side or losing practice on the other side. And so, um, modeling all this out for what it means for you, and by you, the individual that's hoping to achieve this. Look, I think with these LLMs, if you've gotten your prompts down and you know how to use these as an advisor, um, go ahead and load up your P&Ls, your balance sheets. I plan on opening um, a med spa in this location. Uh, and back into everything. I am surprised by how helpful these LLMs are in making those types of not only generating the data, but helping us make decisions. I think it's completely changing the game. And so, to try to answer your question, having the war chest to endure it, having the staying power to endure uh, what seems to be financial stress for the long-term gain is something that you've got to develop a discipline for, and it's part of growing any business. It's not easy, but if you prepare for it, and some days you got it, and some other days you've got more of it, and if you take that positive approach, you can do it.
As a now a franchise owner, what would you say differentiates you guys and your franchise? And what do you think as a franchise leader, like how do you keep a healthy, balanced relationship with your franchisees where you're able to support them in a way that's once again balanced, like where you guys aren't like butting heads and you're able to provide strategic direction knowing that you've done this, you've scaled these businesses to a profitable levels, and you want these franchisees to do the same, but you also understand that every franchisee is also their own business owner, so they're going to have some sort of maybe a take, or the vision is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I'm a bit limited with what I can share because of the franchise disclosure document. So the FDD really does limit me as an owner to communicate a lot of these things. But what I can share is developing a relationship with these franchisees or with potential franchisees from the jump and understanding their ability be disciplined and fulfill the SOPs, to practice in a way that represents the greater brand, uh, to be able to learn techniques and treat patients in a manner that is representative of the greater brand, and having a regular cadence on training both clinically and non-clinically, and being present for advice on how to overcome certain circumstances. Of course, I mean it's paramount. It's what we're there for. Um, but I think it all boils down to getting to know who these independent owners are. And on some of our owners, um, we've run a disc assessment to see if their communication style is similar to ours, so or at least we understand how to communicate with them. Um, but ultimately, an entrepreneurial spirit is a wonderful quality, but can also get you in a little bit of trouble. And so, having the franchisor understand or franchisee understand, um, what are the guardrails and what do they need to come to the corporate office for permission for, and what's allowed within the style of things and what's not is part of understanding that FDD, and getting to know one another. Unfortunately, this is a pretty corporate and rigid relationship. Um, and I say unfortunately because on the front end, it just seems very challenging. But once you get into it, you begin to understand why these guardrails are put in, why these SOPs have been standardized and insisted upon. And you take a look at some of our highest performing franchisees and letter of the law. I mean, they are super high and tight on everything that we recommend. Those that begin to deviate, their performance begins to deviate, and so we try to get them back on track. Um, but again, there is some room to wiggle within the agreement and the the relationship. But we find the more that providers wiggle, the further they get from success, or attaining the same sort of success that we've had on the corporate end.
What is the what are the next steps with ProMD Health? Like, do you have plans to open more locations? Do you want to scale your existing locations? If anybody's listening to this is maybe interested in becoming a franchisee, are you guys going to be opening this up as an opportunity as well? Tell us a little bit more as we start to wrap things up a little bit.
Yes, we're always open to independent owners that want to become a part of the group. Um, our our strategy at the moment is to grow within our existing footprint and make sure that the existing footprint is overwhelmingly successful, that they've got all the things in place from vendor support, reporting, um, new patient acquisition, patient loyalty, um, really the mechanics of the practice. Um, and frankly, if I could be so candid, I think we're looking for an area developer that would take us geographically to another part of the United States, um, in a multi-location fashion. Um, until then, the effort is net sum of marginal gains. Where can we gain an improvement of, a tenth here, a point here, 2 points here, and that goes clinically as well as operationally, um, improving our marketing, improving the entire bit. So, just really taking a step back and looking at each part of that business unit committing time to that business unit, discovering where that business unit can use a little bit of love, deploying that as a new project, deploying the team onto that project, and then closing the loop on it and moving to the next. So it's really just, all boats rise with the tide.
Who's gonna carry the boats, though, George? Who's gonna carry the boats? Um, where can
I got broad shoulders.
where can people find you if they want to connect with you and maybe network mastermind, or if they're interested in becoming a part of the ProMD Health, or maybe come check you out? Maybe I don't know if you're speaking anywhere, but I know that it's good to find people in this industry that you can resonate with, that you can connect with, that you can grow with.
It's certainly a busy season for me personally, but if someone's looking to connect, I think Instagram, fortunately or unfortunately, is probably the best way to do it. Dr.GeorgeMD. I've got somebody that watches that inbox pretty frequently. You can email me, Gavrila, that's GGAVRILA, at promdhealth.com. You can give the practice a call, 410-449-2060. Or just hop onto our website, promdhealth.com, and click on the link. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get in contact with us. It's monitored constantly. But as far as professional relationships, I'm always open to gaining community and fraternity. Um, I think we've got a couple of conferences that we're kicking around at the moment, but to be frank with you, the my own personal life is pretty busy, and then professionally, I haven't been busier. So just trying to juggle that, and make the right decision as to whether or not it's worth doing. But we got a lot of fun stuff in the pipeline for sure. So again, that's Instagram, dr.georgemd, or promdhealth.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Dr. George, for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.